Let's start with talking about sweetness. It's that time of the year when we start to add sweet things to the diet, right? And a lot of those. So we are going to start off with talking about the artificial and natural sweeteners and what those are. So if we are thinking about those, there are many different types of artificial sweeteners. And pretty much what they are, artificial sweeteners, have differing chemical structures. And all of them are fairly incredible at impacting or stimulating the sweet tastes, taste receptors on your tongue. In fact, most of these sweeteners, when we think about them, are so much sweeter than normal sugar gram for gram. We'll talk a little bit about those. Some, like sucralose, have calories, but the total amount needed to provide a sweet flavor is so little that the calories you ingest really are absolutely negligible. But here are the common sweeteners. There's a sulfamate K, which is pretty much known as Sanet and Sweet 1, and they are 200 times sweeter than sugar. There's aspartame, that's known as NutraSweet and Equal, and that's 180 times sweeter. There's Neotame, and I don't know what the brand name is for this one, but it's 7,000 times sweeter than sugar. Are you crazy? There's Saccharine, and this is known as Sweet and Low, Sweet Twins, Sugar Twins, and they are 300 times sweeter than normal sugar. And then there's sucralose, which is Splenda, and this is 600 times sweeter than sugar. Really, really sweet, huh? And those are the chemical sweeteners. Then we start to look at some of the natural sweeteners. And probably the most common of the natural sweeteners is going to be stevia. And stevia comes from the leaves of a plant called Stevia rhodinia, and it is being grown in South America for sweetness and also being used as medicinal purposes. And several of those sweet compounds are found in the leaves. I remember some while back where you could buy the stevia plant from Trader Joe's, and people were drying the leaves and trying to sprinkle it on their foods, but it wasn't very helpful, I don't think. But one of the main steviosides and ributicides, both are very, very sweet, but they're sweeter than sugar gram for gram. There's some health benefits around this as well. It can lower some high blood pressure in people, and it also is very good for controlling blood sugar in people with diabetes. The issue from my point of view is the taste. I'm definitely not a stevia fan. But for those people that like it, it's not a bad natural sweetener to have. The other sweeteners are some of the sugar alcohols. Anything that ends with an OL is a sugar alcohol. So there's mannitol, there's sorbitol, xylitol, and erythritol. Now, what we know about the sugar alcohols or the alcohol sugars is that they can affect the gut bacteria. And so how they affect that is that they imbalance the gut bacteria and they increase the undesirable strains. So erythritol, also very common, is a sweetener that's produced by fermenting corn or wheat starch. But most of the brands on the market are corn-based. And now they actually add a bit of monk fruit to that. And we'll talk about monk fruit as we go through this list.
Excuse me, were you presenting a deck or something? Because we're not seeing anything. I wasn't sure. No, okay. All right. Go ahead.
Of all the sugar alcohols, erythritol is probably one of the best. The negative part about about erythritol, it's got this mouth cooling aspect to it. Doesn't taste so great. It's fine. I actually don't mind this one. I think it tastes a little better than stevia. The next one we look at is xylitol. And a lot of xylitol is used in gums, chewing gum. It comes from the birch tree, which many people have some kind of allergy or reaction to. So for them, this would not be such a great thing. And for a lot of people, if you eat too much of it or add too much of this, it can cause some diarrhea. It's been found, of course, to be good for the teeth, hence it's in the gum. But everywhere I've looked, it says, don't let your dog eat anything that has xylitol in it. It's extremely toxic for dogs. Well, in my case, when I think about that, if it's toxic for dogs, it's probably not so groovy for you either. So watch that. Next thing is the monk fruit. Now, monk fruit is extracted from the monk fruit, right? It's a small round fruit. It's grown in Southeastern Asia. And it is about 100 to 250 times sweeter than sugar. But it also has a lot of those phytochemicals and phytonutrients we talk about quite often. And it's been used in Southeast Asia for many, many, many years as an anti-inflammatory. It has lots of antioxidants. And they've even seen some studies with using this as inhibiting some cancer growth. More to follow on that one. I like it if it's sweetened with some, if it's added to the erythritol. But again, it's got that unusual taste. Monk fruit on its own, just plain monk fruit, I don't think it's that palatable. But again, all of these sweeteners depends on each one of us. And we'll all have some different reactions to those. So the new kid on the block is called allulose. Allulose is found naturally in figs, raisins, jackfruit, and maple syrup. It's got a very sweet taste, almost like regular sugar. And it is considered to be or referred to as rare sugar. It doesn't impact our blood sugar, which is always a good thing. It's pretty good for ketogenic or low-carb diets, as is the others we've just discussed. But the way it doesn't seem to upset the GI. I haven't tasted this. Actually, I have. I've tasted it in one of the health bars one of the companies brought us around to sample. And it's actually quite good. I see you can buy it on Amazon. And it's spelt allulose. ALLULOSE. It's virtually calorie-free. And it, as I say, doesn't upset the gut either. And the reason it doesn't is it's excreted through the urine and it has very low fermentability in the colon, which means it's not causing a lot of bloating and disruption of your gut bacteria. And it doesn't apparently have an aftertaste like xylitol and erythritol does. Now, it's considered to be the sweetener of the 21st century. So check it out. See if it works for you. The other one is yacon syrup. So we're starting to get into some of the other sweeteners too. So yacon syrup is a unique sweetener. It comes from the yacon plant, which grows in the Andes in South America, and has been popular with used as a weight loss supplement. I don't know how true that is. I think you would probably have to have a lot of yacon for that to lose some of the weight, and then there's an impact with how much of that you use. It's very high in FOS. FOS is fructooligosaccharides, and this is very good for feeding gut bacteria. Now, some people, if they have too much FOS, will end up with lots of bloating and some discomfort. But it's a specific fiber that is important for the gut bacteria. So if you have a problem with constipation, then yacon would probably be very good for supporting the gut. And you can buy it at places like Whole Foods for sure. The next thing we look at is coconut sugar. So coconut sugar, it's extracted from the sap of the coconut plant. It's got a lot of nutrients in it, iron, zinc, calcium, potassium. It's got a lot of antioxidants in it. And it has a lower glycemic index than sugar, but it's still fairly high in calories. And if you're thinking about using these sweeteners from a weight point of view, then coconut sugar probably wouldn't be the one that you would use. From a taste point, I think coconut sugar is pretty darn delicious. The next thing is maple syrup. So maple is thick, it's sugary, it's liquid, and it's made by cooking down the sap of maple tree. It's got a lot of nutrients in it and a lot of antioxidants and those phytochemicals too. And who doesn't love the taste of maple? I think most of us do, right? But it's the amount that we consume, and quality plays a huge role, because a lot of times we'll pick up those maple syrups and they just flavored syrups with a maple flavoring. And that's not going to be beneficial at all. So if you're going to be having something with maple syrup, make sure that you're spending the money on it. From a health point of view, it's going to raise your blood sugar. It's fairly high in calories too, but it's certainly going to be better than, say, sugar. The next thing we're going to look at is honey. Of course, it's thick, it's golden, it's liquid, it's produced by honey bees. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals in them. There's some phytochemicals in there that are really important. And then there's some magic in honey. Now, we've been using honey for as long as we've been on this planet, for many functions, for healing, for sweetness. We know that if you get a sore throat, it's very soothing. So honey plays a huge role in that. But when it comes to baking and cooking, honey is probably not the best sweetener that you want to be using, because it needs a lot of support. In fact, it doesn't work as you would do sugar on a one-on-one. It takes a little bit more finesse in using honey when you're baking. But, we know that some of the flavonoids in honey have been very good for actually preventing diabetes, inflammation, heart disease, and some of the cancers as well. So honey is certainly something that we like to have in our diet. So let's talk about sugar, right? Sugar is the big evil. So when we've been comparing all of these sweeteners against sugar, and we know that if we're thinking about from a health point of view, sugar is really something we have to cut out or cut down on at least. So sugar comes from sugar cane or sugar beets. They are crushed to extract the juice. Then it's boiled down to form sugar crystals, and voila, we have sugar. But what's left behind in the bottom of that barrel is molasses. And molasses is that thick brown syrup. And this is where all the nutrients are, is in this thick brown syrup. We have all the minerals, we have phytochemicals. In fact, there is such a high dose of iron in the blackstrap molasses that it is quite phenomenal. Now, if you're buying molasses, blackstrap is the best because it's got all of those nutrients in them. But when we think about sugar, we've got white sugar on one end of the spectrum, and then molasses is on the other end with all the nutrients. So we've refined things. And in between the white and the blackstrap are a myriad of different types of sugar. There's brown sugar, and pretty much brown sugar is just white sugar that's been given a little bit of molasses to it. Then there's raw sugar. So raw sugar really means is that there's a lot more of the nutrients in it. And then there are things like muscovado sugar, which is a lot more of the molasses in it. I will tell you that during the holidays, so for Thanksgiving and then over the Christmas holidays and New Year, is when I actually use muscovado sugar, because it's got that caramelly, molassesy flavor. And I'll talk to you about some of the recipes that I use in it in the next following Mondays. But those would be the ones that I would use. The thing about sugar, of course, is it is a combination of these things that can cause all kinds of damage to the body. We know the sugar is aging, it disrupts our hormones, it saps our energy, we get very fatigued when we have lots of sugar, it raises our triglycerides, it leads to leptin resistance, insulin resistance, diabetes, obesity, gut health. And then there are moments when we're doing some celebration, and I always say that Thanksgiving is Thanksgiving Day, and if you have some sweetness or you're celebrating something, then use something that you know is going to be true and tested. But it's not every single day between Thanksgiving and January that we're loading up with sugar. Because here's the problem with sugar. It changes the way we taste food. So if we constantly or we're routinely using artificial sweeteners, we may start to find less intensely sweet foods, such as fruit, less appealing, because now we have this hyperpalatability where the sweet taste on our tongue, we need more and more of that sweetness to get that taste. And so when you eat an apple and you've been having a lot of these highly sweetened foods, that apple's not going to taste very sweet. Probably going to be a bit on the sour side for you. So we change the taste buds when we have these intense sweetness. And you heard me say about all the alcohol or the artificial sweetness, the natural and the artificial, they are so much sweeter than sugar. So if we keep adding that to the foods, it's going to impact our taste too. We also know that when that happens, then the desire to have things like vegetables and fruits go out the window, and you keep gravitating to the much sweeter types of foods. So we want to be watching that. And we know that there is some data out there that these sweeteners can affect our appetite, again about that palatability. And there is a bit of data about even some weight gain around that. But we know that they can affect the brain's function, and we know that it's a problem with insulin and blood sugar. But as I say, if we're doing this as the occasional treat, it's not such a big problem. I mean, I made something this weekend, and I will tell you that I made it with the monk fruit and the erythritol. And it was this pecan tart. And I thought, and it's not something that I often do. Normally, I'm baking something on the day of Thanksgiving, haven't trialed it out yet. But I decided to trial it on Saturday. Well, the monk fruit and the erythritol was so sweet. And the recipe only called for something like 1/4 of a cup. I think if I was ever going to make that, it would be a teaspoon, because it was just awful. I can't tell you how bad it was. I think I would have been better off to have used something like the muscovado, or maybe some of the blackstrap, or even some of the coconut sugar probably would have played better. Or even some maple syrup would have played better with this recipe than using some of the sweetness. So it gets to be just a matter of taste. How does that taste for you? And just watching how much of that you use. But as I say, if it's for celebration, it should be fine. It's just when we're having this every day that it gets to be problematic.